Welcome back, Tribe. Tonight we're going to be speaking to our special guest, Stith, and he's coming to us from Austin Warrior Arts in Austin, Texas. Tonight we're going to be specifically discussing Hama, which is the historical African martial arts, which is something that Mr. Stith is pioneering in as far as his research and training. And we're going to be looking at the influences of Western and Northern Africa on the sword system of Stith de Côte, which is the silent sword. Everybody, would like to welcome Damon. Damon, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me here.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure. So, Damon, for the audience at home who have not had the pleasure of meeting you or working with you, give us a little bit of introduction to who you are and how you got involved with the martial arts.
Okay. Well, I'm from Austin, Texas. Grew up watching martial arts movies, and really got involved with martial arts when my dad gave me a toy sword. That was like my gateway into like wanting to where martial arts became like a lifestyle and a passion for me. So, I began like any other kid, just kind of emulating what I saw on television until I was able to actually start taking some formal lessons. I started off with East Asian, Okinawan Karate Do, Short and Ryu. And I had the pleasure of training that for a few years and then training in Okinawa with that. But when I was in Okinawa, I was introduced to one, Bruce Lee's philosophy of martial arts, and also to the writings and works of Miyamoto Musashi. And it was at that point, I was a teenager at that time, at that point where martial arts became, not just a means of fighting, but it also became something that was more closely associated with personal, with self-expression. So that was where the seed was planted in me, where I was seeking a martial art and a warrior way that reflected me personally. And eventually I transitioned to Jeet Kune Do. So eventually from Jeet Kune Do, I gained exposure to the arts of Southeast Asia. And through the arts of Southeast Asia, I started doing capoeira and then got into the African martial arts from there. But that seed was planted to find martial arts as a means of self-expression when I was a teenager in Okinawa. So, so I've that's pretty much my trajectory that I've been on since childhood. I've been focusing primarily on African martial arts for probably the last 20 years, and it's been a very rewarding and difficult path, but very rewarding to follow.
Now, Damon, when we met through Maestro Miguel Quijano, because of our mutual interest in the Mani, which is the Afro-Cuban martial art. Mm-hmm. And when we met, I had the pleasure of taking a class with you and saw some really interesting things as far as African martial arts in from the perspective taught in the Americas, some capoeira and some of the 52. Nowadays, you're focusing a little bit more on historical swordsmanship from Africa. Is that correct?
Yes, it goes. I mean, everything is full circle. So I was always, like I said, my introduction was through the sword, and I've always kind of sought out a way to integrate weapons training into my own training. I started working with Kenjutsu at a period of time, and I just kind of found that it was the movement. Although I love the discipline and the tradition of the traditional Japanese Budo, it was too stifling for me as far as, like I said, going back to it being personal self-expression. So I transitioned into more Filipino arts because carrying a knife or fighting with a stick was something that was more something that I can how should I say, it was easily translated into my everyday life. And I couldn't really walk around, even though I did, couldn't really walk around with a katana, on my back or whatever else. But, I live in Texas, so you can carry a pocket knife or, so there was a way for the Filipino arts to kind of find more use for me. But, yeah, so like I said, everything is going back full circle. So from there, the love of the sword has propelled me to kind of find the missing sword art in the African tradition, which is one of the reasons why we chose the name Silent Sword for the art, because unfortunately, with our current understanding of African history and African contributions to martial culture and to the world of warfare, we don't know anything that much about African swords. Many people don't even know that Africans fought with swords, or that there were cultures that fought, from horseback and armor, very much like the knights in Europe and the samurai and the Shi in China. So it's been like I said, going back to personal expression, it's been my goal with the sword to kind of reconnect with that and to expose these lost, not necessarily lost traditions, but this is lost history.
Now, Demont, the silent sword, it also has another meaning. Can you tell me a little bit about that from a historical perspective?
Yes. So the silent sword, Stith, that is the praise name of a very famous hero amongst the Soninke people. The Soninke people were the founders of one of the very first West African empires, called the Empire of Ghana. It was also called Ouagadougou. So Stith was a warrior, and the story goes that his city was protected by this dragon or serpent, sometimes depending on the story. And every year, this serpent demanded a tribute of a young woman of marriageable age that was to become the bride of this serpent. And this warrior, and this was like roughly, I guess they say it was roughly around the 9th to 10th century, when the Soninke were fighting against Almoravids, that this warrior was away fighting this war, and his nation pretty much betrayed him by, choosing his fiancée to become the bride of the snake. So when he heard about it, he left the front lines, came back home, and he plotted the unthinkable, which was to, kill this dragon. So he killed the dragon, and by doing so, he brought destruction to his city and to his people. And the story ends with him and his fiance, being chased out of town, because once he killed the dragon, like I said, the dragon uttered a curse on the city and the state, saying that for 7 years, 7 months and 7 days, there'll be no rain to go and no rain at all. And then eventually the empire of Ghana fell apart and the Soninke people dispersed. So it's kind of a tragic story, but it was actually it was the first story that I encountered that was of an African epic in that scale. I had never heard a story like that before, and this was the very, very first one. So I chose this as kind of like I said, this was the seed planting moment for me. So I chose that term, this name for this hero for our sword art.
And this type of understanding is important, I would imagine, because observing your work and some of your research, you're not just recreating physical techniques. You're also doing a lot of research as far as the lore and the traditions of the various groups that you're looking at.
Yeah. It's with the reconstruction trend in martial arts is really popular now, and it's a lot of people are kind of searching for their roots, not just in the African context, but really in the European context. People are rediscovering their martial arts and their martial culture, and one of the categories, or one of the with groups that have very little like written material to work from, they have to end up using a lot of different sources besides written material. They have to use, folklore. They have to use stories. They have to use, pottery, which is kind of whatever you can find to kind of give you an idea of that period. and shed light on how people fought and why they fought. It you'll find these groups that use it, and they call it in this culture, they call it experimental archaeology. It's like we're using several different sources that may be indirect sources to kind of help shed light on a period of time or a culture. So it's very interesting, like kind of going through it, but it is frustrating at times as well, because information is very limited, and you have to kind of think out of the box, but at the same time it keeps you really humble with your discoveries.
Now, Damon, what about live traditions? And I know there are many live empty hand traditions that are coming from Africa and from the areas that were colonized with Africans. What about the weapon traditions? Are there any left that are being actively taught, that are lines? Tell me something about the live traditions.
Well, the living traditions, one of the most common weapon fighting arts you're going to find on the African continent is going to be stick fighting. You can find stick fighting from all the way from North Africa to Southern Africa, and everywhere in between. Stick fighting is pretty universal. And what's interesting about stick fighting is that much like the Filipino arts, and I had one of my my business partner and my Kali instructor at the time. He corrected me when I referred to Filipino when I referred to Kali as Krima as stick fighting, and he's like, it's not stick fighting. We use sticks as for training, but it's really it's a blade art, and in certain contexts for the African arts, stick fighting is done. The stick is, of course, the stick is a weapon in and of itself, but the stick was used as a substitution for the live weapon, whether that live weapon is a sword, a spear, an axe, or even a fighting stick, to distinguish between like just a regular stick. So the stick was always is like I said, it's our first weapon, but at the same time it's a substitute weapon, a substitute for the live weapon. So which is kind of one of our go-to sources that we found is stick fighting, that the stick was used in place of the sword. So like, for example, in southern Africa, you have Nguni stick fighting, which is pretty common, stick and shield fighting. The Maasai and the Nuer and the Dinka, they still practice the form of stick fighting, with using sticks, a stick and a shield, or the spears used in kind of the same situation where the spears are held in the left hand as a shield, and the fighting stick is held in the right hand. The Nuba in Sudan, they still practice, at least 2 or 3 forms of stick fighting that are direct parallels from ancient Egyptian stick fighting, which is fighting with long sticks, fighting with a stick and a plank, like a plank shield, like this strapped to the arm, and then I think they've had two stick fighting traditions, with the Nuba. Then, of course, in Egypt, there's Tahtib, and in Algeria, there's Al-Nasrag. So stick fighting is pretty common. Now, where we get to like the sword, the Tuareg, which is kind of one of our main focus groups. The Tuareg have lots of different types of sword dances. They some of them range from like choreographed group battles that tell stories to like free flow sparring, between 2 warriors. The Beja, the Havendoa in Sudan, they still practice a form of sword dances that they can range from men kind of showing their prowess and leaping abilities and crouching abilities to like actually showing how they would attack with the blade, and that's done sometimes with just a sword, sometimes with a sword and a shield. But what we find at least in when I say Sudan, I'll say the Sudan, and I'm referring to the area south of the Sahara from Senegal all the way across to the country of Sudan. So that area, when I say the Sudan, I'm referring to that, and then I'll distinguish between east and west. But like in the Sudan, the medieval period, quote unquote, the African medieval period didn't end into the 19th century. So when colonialism was up and running, there were still warriors that were fighting, with sword, shield, spear in the old manner. Of course, like when the British were in the country of Sudan, they were fighting against the Mahdi's army. Some of these guys were still, on horseback fighting in chainmail, with spears and swords. When the Ethiopians fought against the Italians, some were armed with rifles, but then some were still fighting on horseback with spears. So that the good thing for us is that tradition is a lot closer to our period of time than it is, say, for Europe, where with the introductions of gunpowder, the close quarter fighting changed, dramatically because of that. But in that part of Africa, because when guns were first introduced, they were still imperfect weapons, and they were kind of many cultures were slow to accept those weapons over their traditional way of fighting, which was, if they were in cavalry country, they fought on horseback with spear, shield, and sword. So, so we're fortunate that some of these traditions, still, resonate today because, the 19th century wasn't too far from where we're at today.
Now, Damon, Africa is an enormous continent, and it's been visited by many people. Specifically on my mind here is the Europeans and the Arabs. Was there a cross-pollination of martial culture? Were techniques adopted from those other cultures that came to the African continent, or did the African martial culture remain intact to its original form?
That's a difficult question to answer. I think with any form of warfare, there is cultural exchange, even with the conquerors. So, like if you look at Rome, ancient Rome, was of course the premier superpower of its time. But I mean, a lot of key parts of its tactics, they were tactics they had adapted from people they had conquered. The sword design came from the Iberians. I'm not an expert in this area, but there were a few things that the Romans had adapted from the people that they had conquered. So I think that when we're looking at when cultures are at war with each other, how kind of both cultures adapt certain aspects from each other. So of course, especially like with the Arabs, there was a lot of things that were introduced into West and East African warfare. Not to say that there weren't things that had already existed. If I use West African Islam as an example, when Islam entered into West Africa, it entered peacefully through trade, and then eventually the ruling class became Muslims, and then Islam kind of spread that way at first. So at that period of time, Islam coincided with traditional beliefs, and they kind of existed in the same world and kind of worked together in the same world. And I think that with warfare, it was the same thing. So like new technological information was coming, of course, across the Mediterranean, across the desert from the Mediterranean into West Africa, and it was influencing them in that way. At the same time, there were certain considerations that there were certain things that were going on in these areas that, the way they were fighting in the era in the Mediterranean, whatever, probably didn't really make sense. You know, like a lot of cultures didn't necessarily adapt, you know, heavy armor because there really just wasn't a need for it at the time. You know what I'm saying? So I think that cultures tend to overlap, especially when there's a common ground that can be found, you know, within their art. So it's hard to say exactly, you know, where one stops and where the other begins. If I look at Tuareg sword dancing, and it's easy to say, well, you know, perhaps the Tuareg learned this from the Arabs. But when I look at the style of sword dancing and I look at the style of sword dancing that's practiced in, you know, amongst the Arabs, the different Arab cultures have different types of sword dances. There's a difference between the two. There's some similarities, but then there's a difference between the two. So I think that it was a situation of, you know, yeah, there was definitely some information coming in from the north and from the east, but all that stuff had to be deciphered and interpreted and, you know, used, you know, in that context. You know, guns is a perfect example. You know, while the rest of the Mediterranean world were adjusting to and using gunpowder, the Sudanese people, the people from the Sudan, they found that, you know, at the time that the guns were not any more effective than their traditional way of fighting. So it's like you have this new information coming in, but at the same time, it's being deciphered how effective it is at that time. And then, you know, eventually as the technology became more reliable, then it started to displace the older way of fighting. You know, so it's hard to say for certain. But there are some areas that they weren't as influenced by Arab military culture, and they probably retained more of their traditional way of fighting. It's just hard to say for certain, like I said, where one starts and where one ends.
Daman, as the Africans began to leave Africa, their arts went with them, and we see blade arts in the diaspora in the Americas, in the Caribbean, that clearly have African influences. You know, Venezuela, Haiti, even Puerto Rico, Colombia. Yes. So, what have you gathered from your research into the blade arts of the diaspora, and how does it fit into your silent sword curriculum?
Okay, that's a great question. Let me do the curriculum one first, and then I'll backtrack. So our silent sword curriculum is divided up as far as weapons goes into 3 different phases. Our first phase, we deal with the Nile Valley, and this would cover, like, you know, the fighting arts of ancient Egypt and Nubia. And, you know, from there we focus on, you know, Egyptian battlefield arts, using Egyptian weaponry and how it was used during the New Kingdom. New Kingdom is our model for that particular part of our program. It covers stick fighting, battlefield weapons, Egyptian wrestling based off the iconography of Beni Hassan, and archery and such. Our next phase is the medieval period, which, you know, it's based primarily in the Western Sudan, but, you know, with information being as scarce as it is, we do compare and contrast what was being done in East Africa as well. Then our third phase, which is, you know, there's more solid information, is the stick and blade arts of the African diaspora. So in regards to how connected these arts are to the traditional, to their counterparts or their possible ancestors in West and Central Africa, from my research, what I found is that when talking about the origin of these blade arts, it's very similar to what's happened with capoeira. At first, with capoeira, there was a need to describe it kind of purely along local national lines. So it was, you know, very strongly put out that the capoeira was although it was done by African slaves, it was created specifically in Brazil. And so you kind of find people that at least, and I'm going to speak primarily from the Colombian machete because that's kind of my strongest foundation. But you find, and I believe it's the case for Venezuela as well as tire machete in Haiti, is that you'll find that there's at first kind of a movement to kind of, connect the art specifically with the country in which it's practiced in. But what I'm finding with my study is that there are a few things that show that these arts were, and the answer is more complex than just saying that all of it is completely African, all of it's complete, or all of it's completely, European or whatever. I think the more complex answer is that when we know that a large number of enslaved Africans were brought here as they were prisoners of war, and they brought these martial traditions and these cultures with them. Now, in Africa, African martial arts exist in many different ways, and they serve many different purposes in their society. They are, of course, combat arts. They are events that celebrate either the passing of time or rites of passages. They are a form of entertainment, and they're also a means to kind of celebrate the ancestors and the gods or the spiritual world as well. So the biggest connection, apart from the techniques and apart from the movement, because the movement to me is in line with Central African style warfare of movement, which is dynamic evasions, low center of gravity, using the body to displace attacks. You'll find this common thread linking Colombian machete, Venezuelan machete, Haitian machete, capoeira, damier, mani. You'll find this common thread of displacement, dynamic evasion, low movements, crouch movements, malicia. You'll find these concepts kind of connecting all these arts, regardless of whether they're dealing with just the body as a weapon or as a machete or as a stick. But one of the biggest clues for me that a lot of what we see derives from the indigenous cultures of the slaves is that these martial arts still function in multiple ways. Like, they're not just used just to fight, and they're not just used to just passing the time. It's like these arts serve a very holistic part of their communities, in that, one, you develop skill and prowess. Two, they serve as a way to kind of showcase and display that skill and prowess in a way that it establishes kind of a pecking order, allows a person to see that I'm skilled with the blade. Therefore, we don't really have to come into conflict with each other because you've already seen my skill and I've seen your skill, so we can approach each other with respect. It also serves a way to, in Africa, which I forgot to mention, a lot of times the combat sports were used for young men to be able to choose women. You'll find the same thing in these diasporic arts where, it was a way to choose and select, and to go, and it goes back to displaying, finding a mate or attracting a female or whatever to use through your prowess and skills. So it's like you see that these arts serve a strong social purpose. And to me, apart from, like I said, those earlier technical things, the way it functions in the society demonstrates to me the strongest that it is a byproduct. It is rooted in the combat traditions of West and Central Africa. And just to go back a second, in Central African warfare. Primarily, the warriors that fought were what we consider light infantry. They fought without shields, and the Portuguese observers commented that the warriors used a type of military review they call Nzanga, which was a dance that they would show the king. And this dance consisted of twisting, turning, hopping, evading. And these practitioners of this dance, this Nzanga, were called Kimbare, and they were said to be able to like dodge and displace like weapons that dodge and displace edged and impact weapons, and they were able to like dodge spears or arrows being shot at them. So this type of corporal dexterity, when describing it, sounds very, very similar to capoeira. But when you see Colombian machete, you see Tierra machete, and you see even Venezuelan machete, there's still that strong sense of corporal dexterity, of dynamic evasion, of crouched movements, and I believe that this is a strong byproduct of that Nzanga dance that was practiced in Central Africa.
Well, thank you for giving us some insight as far as some of the unique characteristics of the African martial arts. That leads us into my next set of questions. A lot of people don't even know that this exists. Fewer yet have ever been able to, even view it or, be lucky enough to sample a class. I mean, I think publicly that's something that's the closest thing and readily available may be capoeira, but apart from capoeira, there's not many things that are real accessible to people. If you could share with us a little bit more about the unique physical characteristics, and I don't understand that this is, speaking in very wide generalizations, because you're talking about an entire continent worth of cultures and martial traditions.
Right.
But let's focus on Silent Sword specifically and your interpretation and what you're working with. Tell us something about the unique characteristics physically, what you may do differently or uniquely that other arts are not doing or do, in a different way. And what about the strategy or principles involved? And you touched on militia, which I think is a concept that is so important to understand. I was exposed to it years ago by Dr. Brant Smith, and it changed my entire view of everything I was doing. And that's something that I've not seen really taught in other places. So give me some information on that. What are your, give me some insight into what's unique about the work that you're doing here on a physical level and the strategic level.
Okay. So for Seftakote, free play, in Tahiti they call it jousting. Free play is a common way that the African arts are expressed. So you see Zulu stick fight. So you go online and you can look up Zulu stick fighting or Nguni stick fighting, and you're going to find quite a few videos. The thing is, you're going to see like a wide range of people. Some people may be very skilled. Some people may not be as skilled. But what you're going to see is you're going to see two guys interacting with this tradition. Same thing with Tuareg sword. You're going to see an interaction between two guys. And so we've used free play as like the direction that we should move in. So what that does with our approach is that, so instead of being so I teach and we build a vocabulary of movement. And what I've done is I've used these ritual games, I'll say, for lack of a better term, these forms of limited sparring, or these games that are used, that are played. We use that to kind of create drills. So our overall goal is free play, or being able to spar, being able to duel, being able to fight with it. So so take for example let's say, take, for example, tir machete. So tir machete, the way that it is played is there's one person who gives energy, offensive energy to the other, okay? So the goal is the person who's giving the offensive energy is trying to get the defender to move and trying to get through their defense. So the defender is actually trying to maintain, it doesn't always happen, but they're trying to like perceive through the blade, because the blade is like in contact with the blades are in contact with each other. The defender is trying to, sense the attack, parry and move, but still kind of maintain this contact and this connection with their opponent. So it looks very much like, what is it? Push hands in a sense. It has that same kind of feel of push hands or chi sao, where you're moving and flowing, but the drill or the play forces you to stay in contact with each other. So tir machete is like that. Now, that style of that is not like, that's not fighting with the machete per se. You know what I'm saying? It's a drill, it's a game, it's a form of play that develops a certain attribute. In the Western martial arts, they would call it fooling, which is, feeling, being connected, being able to like bind, and then the flow from the bind. So you have this Haitian machete game, and this, I'm using game as a lack of a better term. You have this Haitian machete game or play that teaches this attribute. So what we've done, since we don't really have any drills, we've used these traditional games to develop drills that helps us be better at free flow play or sparring. So I think that one of the unique things that we have with our system is that you learn vocabulary, and then you learn how to put it together. You learn how to express yourself through the vocabulary. If that makes any sense at all. I'm not sure if that sounds too esoteric or whatnot.
No, absolutely. It makes perfect sense. And what about the strategy involved, or the other underlying principles and concepts? Especially, I'd like to ask you if you could share with the audience a little bit about just the concept of malicia and how you apply it and what it even is, because it's not a common thing for people to know if they're coming from other martial traditions.
Yeah. I mean, malicia is everything that we were taught really not to do in like Eastern martial arts, in the sense of, dirty fighting, and of course, it's malicia is translates into English as treachery, but that's not the best word for it, even though treachery is kind of part of it. I think the best way I could describe it for English speakers is to use, I will compare Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny is the king of malicia. Bugs Bunny outwits, outsmarts, stronger, better armed, more violent characters in his stories. And Bugs Bunny is actually an extension of West African and Native American trickster tales. So malicia, in my opinion, is using your wits to outsmart, outthink, outposition a stronger, better equipped, maybe even a better fighter than yourself. And how we apply malicia in our training is through misdirection, through Sun Tzu's principle of, if you want east, go west. If you want north, go south. And that's just simply of, making your opponent feel that you're going to attack in one way, and then your true intention is revealed when they commit all their forces to that one side. So like in sword play, a good example of one drill that we do is like we do we do a 5-count attack drill. So one person will attack, for 5 strikes. And this is based off of Al-Masrag in Algeria. So they'll attack 5 times. And then what I tell my students is this: when you're attacking, you're not just attacking. When you're attacking a target, I want you to think, what opens up when I attack, say, the high line? And then let that opening dictate your next attack. So what you find is the students are using maybe an attack or using an energy, a strike, to expose and open up their opponent. Or even maybe their guard, their position, how you stand. It actually, it's about how you can attack, but it's also, what options do you present to your opponent? So like if I'm fighting someone that's maybe faster than me, maybe I take up a guard that takes advantage of the fact that maybe that it's like you make a proposal that only a fool would deny. So some guards, like with the sword, present targets, and what that does is it forces your opponent to try to take the very obvious route, which is, that leg looks exposed, I'm going to try to get it, and therefore it helps me to be faster because I've cut down their options. So therefore I know that they're going to go maybe 1 or 2 places, and therefore I have my trap already sprung. And that same principle applies in capoeira and in machete fencing as well, is that you expose a quote unquote target, or you create an opening, or you make an opening, and then you close it, and that's the trap. So that kind of interaction happens in like our free flow jousting with the sword, or in my capoeira group, or like the principle applies to person to person fighting, or it applies to warfare on a larger scale. You expose a target or create an opening to draw your opponent there, and then that's the trap.
Damon, thank you for sharing that with us, because I think it's really insightful and it's going to allow people to get a better idea of what it is that you're teaching. There's a lot of other projects that you have going on associated with your guild, the Street Forge Armories. Tell me something about that, because I get to look at a lot of your work, especially online when you post new designs. Tell people what you're doing with that project.
Yeah, that was born out of necessity. When we were first starting Festecote, it was we were using sticks, and then we were using sticks taped up to look like swords. Then there was no one really making African weapons, and I always loved that, especially when I was in Okinawa. I love going to the traditional dojos and seeing the different weapons on display, and I love the Filipino and Indonesian weapons, and kind of seeing that culture and seeing that richness in the weapons. But I never felt that there was enough of that representation of African weaponry. So we started doing this with sticks and then taped up sticks to look like swords. And we tried a few routes to try to get people to make swords for us, either out of plastic or out of even using long machetes and having them modified to be like takobas and swords and stuff for us. But we found that we got some tools. And I just one day I was playing around outside. I'm like, let me just go ahead and I got this scrap piece of plastic, and it's just kind of everything builds off of what else is going on. So I saw that in the HEMA community, they were using nylon and plastic training swords for sparring, and I saw that it was catching on like within the Filipino arts and in other groups and stuff. So like we had a few pieces of sheets of plastic. And, I went ahead and drew a design. I believe the Mbele, the sickle sword was the first one I made. Made the Mbele, the sickle sword, cut it out, and then it's like, okay, this works. So Street Forge Armory was born out of like a necessity of, creating training weapons for us to use. And then from there, we started expanding into, different other styles of swords and, knives and such. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing now. Like we are making training weapons for our sword group, and then we're also making, swords and training knives and stuff for other groups. So we can make just about anything, and it's been a really cool process to feel. It's been very rewarding to and liberating to kind of have that. One more thing along those lines too, because I need to give this gentleman like a big shout out. Brother Kalindi E in Detroit really sparked my interest in, especially in the weapon based stuff, because I remember with his training videos, he was one of the first ones I actually saw with African weapons, with African training weapons. He had an Ikwa wooden spear and knobkerry mace that they were doing drills with, and like I thought that was really, really cool. That was maybe 20-something years ago, and so that image kind of like, hey, he has something, so maybe I can do something as well. So that really inspired me to want to create these weapons and see more of these weapons, out in the martial community.
Damon, what about your choreography? Because you do a lot of work with action choreography. Tell us about that project.
Yeah, everything is like connected to each other. So we one of the ways that I kept myself engaged in martial arts, apart from, like I said, doing, fighting for the sake of fighting, was being able to tell stories through movements. And with people of African descent, we know that, and we're discovering that a lot of our stories aren't being told. Our history is forgotten, and we have to be responsible. We can't really expect anybody else to tell our stories, so we have to empower ourselves to tell our stories and share our stories with our communities and with everyone else. So fight choreography was a way for me to do that, to create the possibility of broadcasting a warrior, a fighter, a hero, a man of integrity that was of African descent to a larger audience. Because as a kid, that's what I was really hungry for. I was starving and looking for a hero that looked like me. And I've always enjoyed, the tradition, the heroic traditions of Europe and of Asia, and feeling quite comfortable there. But I've always felt, since I was a kid, that there was this lack, and that people that looked like me wasn't part of that picture. So fight choreography is a way for me to tell these stories and kind of interact with I shouldn't say interact, but a way for me just to put out these images on a larger scale. So we do stage fighting, for film and for theater. And then how this relates to Hama is that we can actually start making history come to life through battle reenactments. So at some point we'll reenact maybe a famous battle that happened in Africa, and we'll be able to show in large scale in a live setting, what that looked like. So, pretty much, like I said, everything is kind of interconnected and interrelated to each other. Display is a very important part of African martial arts, and even doing mock battles is kind of part of the theater of African warrior tradition. So it's kind of like everything is kind of aligned and in sync with each other. So,
and I'm sure there's an element of desire to want to have a source for historically accurate
Yes.
portrayals, because I've seen, plenty of action, television series, movies that portray characters of African descent from different historical periods, and I always, I can enjoy the choreography as fun action choreography, but there's always just a deeper level to be able to portray that in an accurate manner. Is that something that you're looking to do as well?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's one of my dreams, to be able to consult on any of these like large projects. I know they're going to be filming Black Panther at some point, and I would love to be able to consult on that level. But yeah, I think that choreography is storytelling, and there's I do think that there shouldn't be necessarily any limits placed upon it, but I do believe that there should be a range of things, of options. So like if you want something that is more gritty and closer to the reality of fighting, there should be people who are trained in giving you that. And if you want something that's more fanciful and more, fantastical, I should say, then we see a lot of that already. But I think that having those two voices and everything in between, it kind of helps to keep the community dynamic and not stagnant. So I'm on the end where I like to show like more realistic, grittier style of fighting, which is closer to, because when it all boils down to it, humans pretty much fight in the same fashion. So it's pretty much the same thing, but it would be great to have a more grittier, more rooted movements out there as well. So,
and Damon, just to kind of switch gears a little bit here, I wanted to ask you specifically with your guild and with the Silent Sword School. The tribe, the Raven tribe, is really dedicated to the concept of developing warriorship as a lifestyle on a level, not just focused on the physical aspects of self-defense or martial arts, but also at developing character, developing spirituality. Does your school offer a program, or can you tell me maybe some insight into some of the historical African warrior cultures as far as how that was accomplished, or what was taught, what were some of the key ideas maybe in developing that whole warrior culture and not just somebody that can fight?
Gotcha. Yeah. What I found, and different groups will have different concepts of honor and how they approach honor. The common thread that we use the Tuareg concept of Ashak, and we use the Fulani concept of Pulaku, which means the state of being Fulani, and then Arab Fursia as kind of our main guide. And what these codes of conduct, and they're codes of conduct, and Pulaku means refers to like being confident, being able to take care of the Fulani are herdsmen, so they have this concept of being able to maintain your herd, or being responsible for things that are living, or being responsible for stuff that's been put into your care. Being honest. Some words don't translate directly into English well, but it's a concept of being mindful of how you present yourself in public. The warriors are supposed to be, and these are just, I say warriors, I'm just referring to the men, and this concept also leads over to women as well. But being stoic in a sense of not showing so much emotion. I mean, there's lots of cultural things that are connected with these terms. So they have a lot of I should say cultural baggage. They have a lot of cultural connotations to them. But what we glean from that is, be mindful of how you carry yourself. Be mindful of how you speak. Hospitality is like the the most like common thread that we find in all these things. It's like it's the glue. And hospitality means, how you treat someone, a guest. It also refers to how you treat your enemy. And a lot of times, respect was shown for even a person that was considered your enemy. So these traditions, these cultural traditions, we use them and try to apply them to modern life because they have a lot of lessons to teach. As far as, like I said, just being responsible for being responsible for the things around you, being mindful of how you speak and mindful of how you carry yourself, being patient, showing, fortitude in the face of danger. When I said being stoic, the idea of not letting emotion like move you and rule you, but maintaining evenness and a calmness about you. But that calmness is also based on confident strength as opposed to I should say weakness and such. So there's lots of parallels with many other warrior traditions, and in fact the Arab Farsi traditions may have influenced the knightly chivalry codes of Europe, because of more Spain. That concept, there's lots of like crossover with what the Arabs viewed as honorable and how warriors should conduct themselves into battle, and how you conduct yourself amongst just everyday people. So that kind of stuff is like a work in progress, because we're having to find these terms, find these ideas, but at the same time understand that they do have a certain cultural connotation, but finding a way to apply them to like our modern life. So, but those are the main concepts. It's like my ideas is hospitality, humility, a calm, confident strength, protect those that can't protect themselves, and empower those who can't protect themselves to be able to protect themselves. Self-reliance, hard work. These are all concepts you'll find in, like I said, the code of Pulaku and the Ashak of the Tuareg, and many other cultures. There's more than I can name, because it's like within, like, say in Nigeria, there are so many different groups in that one country. It's hard to kind of like paint it all in just like one broad stroke. But I tend to see that hospitality is like the big common thread amongst them all.
Well, Damon, I want to thank you for taking out time to be with us today. The information is fantastic, and I hope to get you on again soon, because there's a lot more we can talk about for sure. But before we go, can you please tell me where the audience can find you, if they want to reach out to you for training in the Austin area, if they want to learn about the martial arts, the choreography, if they want to order some pretty nice trainers, and especially if they want to get you to come out and do some choreography for the Black Panther movie? Where are they going to find you online?
Okay, if you go to silentsword.org, that is our website, and it has all our information. There is a page on the Silent Sword website called Street Forge Armory. You can purchase some swords from there. We are going to have the Street Forge Armory website up soon. So for now, I would say go to our Silent Sword website and contact me that way. Just bear in mind, if you are interested in trainers, what we have posted there, that's not all that we have, and we're able to do just about anything. So if you have a design in mind, we can more than likely make it. We're going to be posting. We are trying to build study groups to kind of broaden our community, the Hama community. So if you're interested in learning about traditional African, martial arts or battlefield martial arts, sword fighting in particular, please contact me and we'll talk about how to, set it up. We're working on some online courses to get people started. And that's the gist of it right there. So, and I also have a YouTube page under my name, which is Damon Stith, and I usually post some lessons that we're doing in class. So if you want to follow along with us, from via YouTube, then that's an avenue there as well. So yeah, that's mainly it. Facebook is my name, Damon Stith. I post the same videos on the Facebook. So.
Great. Well, Damon, again, thank you very much. And I just really want to say that I even though I don't train with you, on a regular basis, this is not an area that I'm, dedicating my time to. I just want to applaud you and thank you for all of the hard work that you're doing, because you're preserving such an important part of world martial culture. These are things that, would slip away to time if people like you weren't, diligently working on this. So again, just as a martial artist, you make our martial arts community better by, preserving this information and doing so much hard work on it. So thank you for everything.
Thank you. One more thing, I'm glad you said that. There's one more thing I want to say real fast. Just a year ago, as far as the Haitian machete tradition goes, we lost a professor, Maestro Professor Avril. He passed away. He's in his 80s, and there's a lot of wisdom and information that just went with him. And his sons have taken up the mantle to kind of continue teaching his family system. So if you guys are interested in Haitian machete, and I would suggest you guys try to contact Mike Dillon to kind of see how you can be involved with Tir Machete, which is the Haitian machete fencing, and just along the same lines, because in Colombia, another old maestro passed away about 6 months ago, and there's another maestro who's in his late 80s. And he's been ill lately. So like if you get a chance, go to if you find the Eskrima con Machete group on YouTube or on Facebook, and look them up, reach out to them, and see how you can help support these maestros in Colombia and Haiti and in Venezuela, because their light is still there, and it is, they're getting older, and it's passing, and we need to make sure that we're in a position to take that fire and pass it on, because it's, 80, 90 years old, in that tradition, it's like there's nothing I can do to ever compare to that. So like if you get a chance to see some of these other groups that are in Colombia or in Haiti or in Venezuela, like really, really reach out to them and see what you can do to, help support them, because they need us as much as we need them. So that would be my parting words.
Well, Damon, again, thank you so much, and thank you for pointing, the audience into the right direction if they're interested in learning. And by all means, to the audience listening, check out Damon. I've touched hands with him in person. I've been, a student on his floor, and he's an excellent instructor. I don't give that kind of praise lightly, but he deserves, every bit of it. Damon, again, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we get you back on real soon.
Okay, thank you.